Today, we are not discussing the metrics or folly of the games industry. This episode will be different. This is a story about a game that found me. This is that conversation. There was a room I spent a lot of time in. My dad was a chauffeur at the time, doing his best as a single father, which meant he was gone a lot, which meant I came home to a quiet apartment most evenings. I was unsure of myself in the way that you are at that age, when you have not yet figured out what you are good at, or whether any of that even matters. The routine was this. I come home, I make dinner. My Nonna had taught me particular recipes that were easy to make on their own. Garlic spaghetti, a cheap household staple with a particular way of making it that was ours. I would put together a batch for the week, some protein alongside it, and then eat, and then go to my room. The homework would come out, and I would power through it, or, well, if I'm being honest with you, dear viewer, completely fabricate my way through it when I had to. And then there was the other thing. You see, gaming had always been my space, but this is a story about one game in particular. Dark Souls, the Prepare to Die edition, that is. Sitting quietly on a laptop that wasn't built for it. Games for Windows Live, which today feels like a fever dream, but felt close to terrible back then. Blighttown was a coin flip on whether the game's frame rate survived long enough to let me play online. And the kicker, I was not even using a controller. I was using a trackpad and a keyboard. I had no idea what I had planned for life. I thought psychology for a moment. My Nonna pushed me towards computers. None of that meant anything to a teenager. All I needed to worry about was making it to Friday. The girl that made the week worth having. And basketball after school with the guys. I get home, I get dinner going. My metrics were surviving the course of the day, but I needed something more than survival. Something achievable. Something that told me I was capable. Dark Souls does not tell you that you are capable. It really doesn't tell you much of anything. Most games put yellow paint on the wall that can be climbed, glow the item that should be picked up, mark the door that opens, a nudge at every corner so nobody misses anything. Dark Souls did not have any of that. It presented a problem to you, and waited. There is a term for what happens when a game like this finds you wanting. Filtered. The boss is too difficult, and you quit. The game is too opaque about what it is, and you quit. The mountain is too high, and you decide you do not have an answer for it. This could not happen to me. Not with this game. Not then. The mountain was the point. You start as you do in a lot of games of this caliber. A nobody. The game doesn't tell you how long you have been in that cell. It does not tell you who you are or what you even did to end up there. One day, a knight, a proper one, drops a key from the ceiling. He doesn't explain himself. He just leaves, and you walk out. The first messages are on the floor. Rough notes. Bog standard instructions on how to move. The only courtesy From Software was ever going to extend. But they also introduce you to how this community speaks to each other. Little notes left in the world that you can either read or ignore. The game never announces it. It just shows you the words on the stones and lets you figure out the rest. You ascend from that very cell, and you find the first bonfire. It's a place of respite. You learn what it means not by being told, but by the way your body will respond to it. You may sit straighter, breathe a bit easier, get up, grab a drink, and come back. You are still safe, until you rise. A large door, heavy. It opens. A demon falls from the balcony above. The game would rather you run, but it doesn't tell you that. It just makes the exit visible and leaves that choice to you. If you stayed and fought with what you had in those first 60 seconds, well, you probably died. The lesson was yours to take or leave. Welcome to Dark Souls. You eventually find the knight again, dying, and he gives you the Estus flask, an orange bottle. In every Soulsborne game it can go by many names, but it is the same thing. Salvation. The finite resource that stands between you and starting over. You fell the ASYLUM demon by whatever means you managed, and you move on. The mountain has not yet started. You arrive in Lordran. A forlorn warrior greets you with detached interest. You must ring 2 bells of awakening. To what end? He does not say. You go anyway. The Undead Burg is the game's first real lesson in paying attention. Hollows with swords and shields. Hollows with crossbows on the rooftops. And at the top of a tower at the end of it, the Taurus demon. A large creature, horns, and an axe the size of a door. The arena is the lesson if you look at it. There is a ladder just behind you. There is a ledge above. The plunge attack is never explained to you. You either find it, or you trade hits with something that has no business being fair at that stage of the game. On my playthrough, I did the latter. Past the Taurus demon on the wall above the burg, you meet a knight standing in the sun. Solaire of Astora. He is looking for his own son. He says it honest, without embarrassment. He has come to Lordran because the sun here feels close enough to touch, and he wants to find a son he can call his own. He gives you the white soapstone, the item that lets you leave your sign in other players' worlds, the means by which you can enter someone else's fight and help them through it. Jolly cooperation, he calls it. The idea that finding your way through a difficult world is better with someone along your side, even briefly, even a stranger. I personally didn't have anybody to call for jolly cooperation. Games for Windows Live made sure of that. The guys I talked to at lunch and on the basketball court were not playing Dark Souls on a laptop trackpad. My girlfriend at the time had her own mountains, different ones. I had one person in my life at the time that understood the mountain. But, once again, games for Windows Live. So I carried Solaire's stone, and I didn't use it much, but I understood what he meant by it. Someone who grasps the importance of seeing your task through. Someone who does good for its own sake, and invites others to do the same. You meet him on a wall in the sun and you think, there is one of mine out there. Then there is the bridge. A dragon lives on it. A proper one. He breathes fire across the entire length of it, and the first time you see it you have a choice. Run the gauntlet, and hope you make it to the portcullis on the far end beneath him. Or, you notice the staircase just halfway across, and drop down to the shortcut that takes you back to the bonfire, and around into the parish from underneath. I can assure you I didn't make it straight across on my first run. I found that ladder, like everybody else who learns that lesson the honest way. Into the parish. The armored boar in the courtyard before the portcullis. Which will ruin your afternoon if you didn't figure out the fire mechanic behind it. Past the portcullis, into the cathedral, where the first bell lives. Balder Knights in ambush. Hollows in the rafters. A channeler dancing a jig, empowering the hollows lying in wait therein. On the way up there is a cell. Knight Lautrec of Karim. He is locked up, and he would very much like to not be. You have a key, and he seems like a knight. Knights are presumably good, so you let him out. You figure, why not? Dark Souls has opinions about that kind of thinking. You will form your own later.
Thank you. Yes.
The bell gargoyles are on the roof. 2 of them. Your first real introduction to what this game does, which is show you the rules, and then change them halfway through. You are close to bringing down the first, then the second lamps. You answer that question too. Both felled, and the first bell rings. Right after that first bell, I took the detour most first-timers take. Andre, the blacksmith in the parish, he sells a key for 20,000 souls. The crest of Artorias. A door into the Darkroot Garden just behind it. And therein, the Forest Covenant. Which were host to invasions and the Covenant's protectorate. And then, 2 bosses the game does not point you towards. The Moonlit Butterfly first, probably the gentlest boss in the game. Majestic. It floats. It glows. Getting to it is its own ordeal, but the boss itself is almost peaceful. Dark Souls does in fact contain multitudes. Sif is a great grey wolf guarding the grave on the other side. He's guarding the grave of a fallen knight. To reach the fight, you must use the very crest, 20,000 souls up front. And navigate a forest full of people whose sole purpose is to stop you. And then, you fight. Toward the end, when you have him, Sif limps. The wolf drags the sword because it cannot hold it properly anymore. You know you have won. It feels bad anyway. The game never apologizes for that, it just presents the moment and lets you sit with it. That is a different kind of lesson from anything the burg or the parish had taught you just moments before. Then down, through the lower burg, into the depths. Which is exactly what it sounds like. A sewer system. Just before that, A demon of immense size, and just a tiny corridor. And then a sewer system itself, full of rats. Basilisks that inflict curses. And a butcher. Through the depths and into Blighttown proper. Toxic dart blowgunners on platforms above a swamp that poisons you for existing near it. On my laptop, the frame rate collapsed. Blighttown on games for Windows Live on underpowered hardware is its own specific category of punishment. But, if you persevere, there is Quelaag. Half woman, half spider, and entirely unhappy to see you. You fell her just the same. And the second bell rings. With that, the gates to Sen's Fortress opens. Sen's Fortress is where the game decides it is done being patient with you. Swinging blade traps on timers, pitfalls that send you back to the very bottom, serpent men with opinions about your continued existence, and a Titanite demon in a room with no retreat. And then there was a room that felt wrong the very moment I walked into it. A chest, sitting there, awkwardly. The game had not put yellow paint on anything up to this point. No glowing items, no markers telling me what to open and what to leave alone. So I opened it. That is what you do with chests. It was a mimic. And it ate me. The game assumed I would eventually figure out the difference. It didn't apologize. It didn't put a warning sign on the next one. It just waited to see if I had learned. Through Sen's, you come out into Anne Orlando, the city of gods. The architecture is designed to make you feel small. That is the point. Silver knights on buttresses with great bows that will throw you off the ledge and wait for you to try again. The iron golem before the city proper. The winged demons patrolling the ramparts. I remember the morning my father had a day off. He had heard about this game, said it seemed pretty neat. He would watch me play sometimes when I was just sat at my desk in a dark room, when he had the time. I was working through the approach to Anne Orlando, clearing out the golems and the winged demons on the way to find the blacksmith because I needed to upgrade my weapons, of course. He watched me work through a particularly difficult stretch of it. When I cleared the encounters, he just said, "You took out those golems." He grew up with horror games. I grew up watching him. I thought he might appreciate what this one was. He did, in the way a parent appreciates seeing their kid serious about something. It was a small moment. But at that time and at that age, it meant something. I was not always like this. There was a version of me not long before that apartment, playing Gears of War 2 with a friend on the 360. Its hardest difficulty. I was an anxious ball of fire back then, getting upset, yelling, close enough to throw controllers across the room. My friend, who I'm still close with today, who does not remember this the way I do and I dare not even tell him, was just trying to get through the game. Something shifted between that and the apartment. I don't think it was a decision that I made. It was the environment. You cannot be anxious in a quiet apartment when your father is out there doing his best to keep the lights on. The anger had nowhere useful to go. The girl in my life would probably not have appreciated that version of me either. So somewhere in there, I became something closer to stoic. Not because I had read the thoughts of Seneca or Epictetus, but because the circumstances made it the only reasonable outcome. I had everything I needed, marginally speaking. I had a roof, the laptop, underpowered as it was, food I knew how to make, and a father doing his best, which meant I needed to do mine. Anger at a video game was a luxury I had quietly stopped affording. Dark Souls tested that. Not out of cruelty, but because the game was honest. Why attack a third time when you don't have enough stamina to dodge the follow-up? Why run past 6 enemies to reach a boss and arrive there empty? These are not even rhetorical questions. The game asks them by killing you, and then it waits for your answer. I would go to sleep after a bad session, not angry, but calibrating. What was I supposed to do there? Was I missing an item? Did I not explore well enough? Is there a weapon that answers this fight than the one I'm currently carrying? I would lie there running the encounter in my head, and wake up the next morning, come back to it with a softer mind. My build was a mess, which I didn't even figure out yet. I started as a wanderer, because I liked the look, a scimitar, dexterity focus. Diablo had taught me to put points into your main stat and branch out to only meet the item requirements. I applied that logic here. Most levels went into dexterity, a few into endurance, not enough into anything else. Lordran didn't care about that logic. Ornstein and Smough. I solved on a Saturday morning. I slept on it. I came back fresh mind, and I got it. Oh, and Orlando. Everything before it had been no slouch. The Capra demon in a stairwell barely big enough to move in. The gaping dragon. Sif. Difficult, and sometimes maddening, but survivable with enough repetition. I had figured out most of what the game was asking. Then I walked through that fog gate in the cathedral, and met 2 bosses at once. Ornstein was fast, and Smough was enormous. They moved differently, attacked differently, covered different ranges, and my dexterity-focused wanderer with the measly endurance and almost nothing invested anywhere else was the exact wrong tool for the specific job. The game had not been cruel to me up to this point. It had been honest. Ornstein and Smough were also honest. They found everything my build could not do, and put it in a room, and told me to answer the question. I answered it anyway. More attempts than I will ever admit to. Each one a small education in what I was doing wrong, where I was spending stamina I shouldn't have, which one to prioritize and when. Eventually it clicked the way things click when you have run the same problem enough times that your hands know the answer before your brain even catches up. I didn't celebrate. I just sat with it for a moment and moved on. The game wasn't done. Past An Orlando, the mountain gets darker and less willing to explain itself. The Tomb of the Giants is exactly what it says. A cave system with no light. There is a skull lantern you can find down there. There's also a ring that does the same job. You would only know either existed if you were reading item descriptions meticulously, cross-referencing what the game gave you. Paying the kind of attention that a trackpad-laden wanderer trying to survive does not always have the bandwidth for. I didn't have either of them. I navigated the Tomb of the Giants mostly blind, by feel, by dying in the dark until I knew where the edges were. The game had no interest in handing me a torch. It put me in the dark and waited to see if I would find my way through it. That is not a design flaw. That is Dark Souls saying the same thing it has been saying since the ASYLUM. Here is the problem. Figure it out. Lost ASYLUM is a different kind of darkness. The game's opening cutscene mentions it obliquely. A land consumed by fire and chaos. Nothing prepares you for what that actually looks like when you get there. A hellscape, lava beds, and demons everywhere. The architecture of a place that used to be something before the fire took it. The game just drops you in and lets you feel the scale without ever mentioning anything. Solaire is down there somewhere. I'm not going to tell you what becomes of him. If you know, you know. If you don't, well, what I will say is that his ambition led him into some dark corners, the way ambition does. And that the warrior who gave you a white stone and talked about jolly cooperation on a sunlit wall is not the same thing that you find at the end of that road. Some people make it to their sun, some do not. The game doesn't soften that. The Duke's Archives. Seath the Scaleless throws you in a prison, and the game for the first time takes everything from you. I remember sitting there not really knowing what to do. I remember wanting to ask someone. My dad was around that day, but how do you explain this to someone watching with interest from across the room? How do you say I'm in a cell and I don't exactly know how I'm supposed to get out in a way that lands? He was supportive. He understood that this was serious to me. But this was not a mountain anyone in my immediate circle had climbed. The guys from the court were not here. My girlfriend had her own problems to solve, and this one was mine. I sat with it, the way I had been sitting with everything in that room. I looked at what I had. I looked at what the cell gave me. And I figured it out. The mountain was still asking its question. My job was still to answer it. Through the archives, through the crystal cave, Seath himself, the dragon without scales who went mad seeking what he could never have, sitting at the end of it. You fell him too, and you keep going. The kiln of the first flame is the end of this road. You walk through it, and every enemy you face is just a black knight. The game's hardest standard enemy type, placed one after another with nothing between them. No shortcuts, no bonfires, just the path and what is on it. It feels like the game at this point is saying, you have come this far. Prove the rest. And then there is Gwyn. I felled Gwyn. It did not feel like a typical ending. No credit sequence designed to make you feel important. No fanfare calibrated to tell you that you had done something extraordinary. Just a quiet contentment that the mountain was behind me. I didn't make an announcement of it. My dad was working, and had better things to worry about than his son's victory over a video game. The guys from the court were not going to understand a word I said if I tried to explain a gaping dragon and an old man who feared death so much he started a fire and refused to let it go out. I just sat with the knowledge that I had seen the top. And then the game quietly told me to do it again. New game plus, same world, every enemy back, harder. The game had no interest in letting the victory mean the end of the problem. It just presented the problem again, and waited. I understood then what Dark Souls actually was. It's not really a game that you finish. It's a game that you have a relationship with. The mountain doesn't go anywhere. You just get better at climbing it. I'm not going to tell you Dark Souls made me a better person. I do not know if that's true, and it's too large a claim to make about a video game. However, I will not dismiss the people who would. I bet you've seen those videos, dear viewer. The kind that say Dark Souls had saved my life. I understand them. A lost teenager, a girl holding the broken pieces together, a need to find something he could be capable of. I understood, because in a way, it is true. What I do know is this. There was a room, a quiet apartment, a routine built around doing your best because someone else was out doing theirs. And inside that routine, there was a problem nobody else would hold my hand through. No yellow paint, and no marker pointing at the answer. A game that did not stop to check whether I was capable. It just asked the question. And something in me, the same part that could not leave the homework undone even when I didn't understand it, needed that. Needed a mountain with no instructions. Needed to find out what I was actually capable of if I simply tried. The wanderer with the wrong build and the trackpad and the spaghetti, made in batches, found out that he could. I don't think that is unique to me. The people I had around me at the time, the guys on the court, my girlfriend, and even my own father watching from across the room sometimes, were not climbing this particular mountain. That is not a judgment on any of them. Their mountains were different. This one was mine. And I think there are people watching this who had a mountain like it, who needed exactly what kind of game Dark Souls was, or something similar. It wasn't the difficulty, it was just the honesty. The refusal to soften the problem. The assumption, not the assurance, that you will eventually figure it out. If that found you at the right time too, I would like to hear about it. Because in some way, you probably already know what I mean, and you don't need me to explain it. The game just quietly told you. Do it again. I am Agis. Thanks for watching. Hello everybody. This episode was a bit different this week. As much as I would like to cover the industry falling apart at the seams, I actually wanted to share a story and see if any of you might have something similar to say. It doesn't have to be Dark Souls. It could be any number of things. But I think the message was clear. If such a game did find you, let me know about it. Until then, all I can tell you, thanks for watching.